All right, so I thought I would pick up where Joe sort of left off in the discussion of suffering according to the Buddha. And I wanted to introduce you to the goddess of compassion, who is called Quan. And she is a Chinese Buddhist deity. And she's known as, her name in Chinese means one who perceives the cries of the world. And her medicine is compassion. And she turns toward that. Her compassion comes from moving toward the suffering. And it's said that she manifests wherever beings need help. And I didn't know a lot about her. So in my research, my dabbling of research, because I'm not a scholar, just a dabbler, but I found it interesting that she's portrayed in a variety of different ways. Sometimes she's shown as holding a willow branch, which symbolizes resilience and bending, never breaking, even in the fiercest storms. And we know suffering can be quite fierce. Sometimes she's shown as having 1,000 arms with an eye in each palm, and that symbolizes her constant awareness of anguish and the responsiveness to it. And then sometimes she's also portrayed as a warrior with a variety of different weapons, and that is symbolizing fierce compassion. And sometimes we need to get fierce in our compassion when there's suffering that needs to be addressed and maybe even removed. So basically her teachings are to be present for suffering and pain. And that goes for the suffering of other people. And it can also go for being present to ourselves when we're listening to the stories that we are telling ourselves about who we are. So it's both for others. And I found that really interesting and a great reminder that I should also be listening to myself with compassion and gentleness. Because it's in that willingness to sit and be still that compassion can come forward. And so the means to listening with compassion is curiosity. Remember Joe saying something about, being more curious than afraid, right? So I think of curiosity as the doorway to compassion. And I think that for me, as I was sitting with this, I noticed that it kind of moved me away from any of my predetermined conclusions. Sometimes, when I'm listening to somebody, I'm not actually listening to them. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say because I've already solved the problem. And that's really this illusion of certainty. We like to know what's going to happen. I know for me, my humanness, I'm uncomfortable with uncertainty. So my brain wants to jump ahead, solve the problem, and we're all good. So it takes me, when I can just sit and be curious and wonder, it really then brings me into the realm of openness, of possibility, of being receptive. And that is then the place where we can bring forth or give birth to something new. And when I thought about that, I got excited because I thought, okay, well, when I'm in this state, that means I have the capability to give birth. And so that goes for anyone. If you're a man or a woman or anywhere in between, when you're in that open, receptive state, that means you have the potential to bring forth something new. I thought that was pretty exciting. I think that curiosity also reminds us of the 3 R's that Joe talked about last week: refrain, relax, and relate. And yes, I had to write them down because I do not have them memorized, probably never will. But when we are relaxed and when we are refraining, we can really let go of the compulsion. And again, I'm talking about myself a lot here, the compulsion to defend against pain. You know, this, sometimes it feels like too much. And so I might feel like I need to push it away. And that goes for other people and also my own. How many times have I shoved down my own suffering or my own pain or whatever it is, because I could not relax into it. I was very defensive against it. We also don't have to react with a solution or an excuse. And we also don't have to feel compelled to fix or remove the suffering. Now, sometimes there may be a call for that. Remember Quan, the warrior. And I was thinking about something like systemic racism, you know, in that, in a situation such as that, fierce compassion may be called for, but sometimes I come to that angry. It's not compassionate. I'm just mad. And so to have that fierce compassion, it's a very different sensation. And in this whole process, we can learn discernment. We can learn when it's time to be still and listen, and we can learn when it's time to take some sort of compassionate action. But I also felt like curiosity just kind of asks the ego to step aside a little bit. And then I can just be present for whatever needs to be heard. And so presence leads to compassion, and compassion is the medicine. And now, obviously, I practice this. I definitely do not succeed in it at all times. And I actually got in the way of this a little bit this week. Speaking of our dear Joe, I got an email from him and he had had a rough night. And half of me was there to just be there, you know, and just listen and be present. And then the other half of me couldn't stand it that somebody dear to my heart was in pain, and I really wanted to fix it and make it go away. And that was all about me and my discomfort. And yes, I confessed to my teacher that I had done this, and, you know, 50-50, not too bad, gives me something to work with. But, you know, it's a tricky business to be still and allow someone else the lessons that may come from their suffering. I don't even like that. I just said it and I don't really like that. But I also think it's true. And I can think about my times of suffering and the incredible lessons that I learned that I wouldn't want to trade. I'm so happy that I know them, and I would not have received those lessons if somebody else had stepped in and taken that suffering from me. So hopefully I've made a good case for compassion, and you guys are all on the compassion bus and you really want to do this. So how do we? And so I want to talk a little bit more about the questions that Joe brought up last week. And I actually have 3. 2 of them are from Joe, and one was what Scott had mentioned. So I actually have 3 questions, and so it's a little bit of a repeat, but I'm going to dig into them a little bit too. So the first question is, what is going on inside of my body? And that was what Scott mentioned. And for me, I think it has to come first. And that is because it takes me away from blaming the external. You know, I can't be pointing at somebody else and saying, well, you made me mad. This is your fault. As soon as I tune in and start to inquire about what's happening inside me, it goes from something that I think I can control, you know, the external, and I try all the time. The truth is that's also an illusion. I truly can't. To something internal that I do have influence over. Now, and I'm not talking about control. Whenever I say control, I always think about like strong arming something, or, you know, like shove it into the box and make it fit. So that's why I say influence. I can influence it. Because when I notice my reaction to something, then that's kind of the necessary pause. If compassion is, or if curiosity is the doorway to compassion, I think I got that right. This is unlocking that door. Like I need to unlock the door first, and I need to be paying attention to what's going on inside of me. And I have also experienced moments where those internal reactions just steamrolled in quicker than I could press the pause button. And that does happen. And that's also okay, because this can happen after the fact as well. Like after the storm blows through, we have our or big reactions. I don't want to say they're crazy because they make sense in the situation. We can kind of take stock of what happened, and that just prepares us for the next time. And again, it's a practice. The next question is from Joe, and how can I practice with this? And I feel like this is the personal responsibility part. This is where I can exert my influence. I'm not necessarily, practice. What does that even mean? That means working with something. It's not forcing it into anything at all. So it allows for whatever comes up. It gives it some space. I have this image of it like stretching and, movement. It gives it an opportunity to deliver the message that it came to deliver, say what it needs to say, and to get what it needs, which actually, I think, is presence and compassion. So it's this, circle that all cycles around. And then the third question is, where does this lead? And I love this one because as we're doing our internal inquiry, and we're practicing and we're allowing these things to unfold, I think naturally this may lead to something new. When you have all this space, finally, something else has the possibility of happening. And it's interesting because in this big open space, this expansion, as soon as something new might start coming in, that can trigger some fear because it's the unknown. And so what does fear do? Retraction. I think of a little hermit crab, they like creep out of their shell and then pop back in. And this is in my experience, and this may be true for others, it is a process of like expansion and retraction. So it's not a bad thing, but it's certainly notice when that you're in that space of being receptive and potentially bringing forth something new, and what happens in that space. What happens when fear creeps in, and where does that lead? How can I practice with that? What's happening inside of me? It all just continues to turn us back to ourselves. And then, again, I think it's worth saying to remember to be more curious than afraid. I feel like, curiosity is also the medicine for fear. So, we have these lovely questions. We have a step-by-step process. What happens if we don't want to? What happens if we don't want to have compassion for someone or something? And I thought of this because I didn't want to have compassion. When we were talking a few weeks ago about all the shootings, and it's not like the shootings have stopped, right? Like this is still happening. But I had a moment where a thought came to my head that the shooters were suffering and as such needed compassion. And I immediately slammed the door on that thought. I thought, no, I do not want to extend compassion to those people, right? And I had a great story that justified why. And I just wanted to be in that space of, arms folded and no. So what ended up happening, and I think I did this a little bit unconsciously, but I did use those 3 questions. I think you can put your unwillingness through the 3-question process. What's happening to me while I'm feeling this unwillingness? How can I practice with that? And where does it lead? And so what that led me to was the realization that my unwillingness and my stubborn no energy was the same as the energy that these people who come in and do the shootings have. And so what I was doing in my unwillingness and my, like, I am entrenched in this and I'm not giving it up. And I'm even, I even have these fists, right? Like so clenched, is adding more of that same energy to the world, which is the exact opposite of what I want. Bottom line. And so no matter how mad or angry I feel towards people who might take these actions, I am more interested in removing that kind of energy from the world or shifting it into compassion and love and peace and mercy. And so that can take the, that took priority over me, digging in my heels and sticking to my story. So that was the beginning of cracking that open. But here's where it gets a little mystical. And I want to say that when I was getting ready to do this, I was thinking like, what should I talk about? And I have this deck of cards with a variety of women mystics and goddesses and saints. And when I found Quan, I knew it was her. And what happened is as soon as I started working with her, I actually felt that compassionate energy come in to my space. And it really infused my whole body. And what I realized is that, first of all, that was incredible. And I wanted more of that. And secondly, when my little human self cannot do something, I can ask for help. And in this case, I asked for help from Quan Yin, where I didn't know that I was doing it, but it happened, and it taught me that her energy is available to anyone who needs it. We just need to ask and to open up ourselves to it. And I think that's true. We all have energy signatures. We all can borrow the energy of any of the saints or mystics or deities that we identify with, or that have certain qualities that we might need at a certain time. And I think it's very accessible to anyone. So that was it was a relief, to be honest, to know that because I can't fake compassion. The universe knows when it's not real, so if I'm not feeling the love for a certain person or a certain circumstance, there's a saying, fake it till you make it. Well, not in this case. I don't think, I think that being able to borrow this energy really swept out that story that I had about, people perpetrating kind of those heinous actions. And thank goodness that I don't have to do it all myself. So if you're interested, I would love to invite you to try that out. I guess that concludes my talk. So I guess, we can stop the recording, and then I'll kind of segue us into meditation mode.